The cave was shelter, yet never home. Its walls held warmth from fire, but also the weight of fear. Families pressed together, carving stone into blades while the world outside glared with predators and storms. Food nearby soon vanished, forcing hunters farther from safety. Nights echoed with growls and thunder, yet the horizon teased with both threat and promise. Here, survival and curiosity met for the first time. The choice was clear: remain in shadow or step into the unknown, beginning humanity's first journey forward. Small family groups began to edge beyond the hunting grounds they once knew. Every step widened their world across grasslands swaying in heat, to rivers alive with crocodiles and hippos. Travel was perilous. A bitter root could poison, a shadow could hide a predator, and rival clans sometimes barred the path. Yet each threat carried reward: a spring bubbling with fresh water, a trail alive with game, a clearing safe for firelight. Slowly, fear gave way to resolve. The horizon no longer stood as a wallet unfolded, as a road leading them further into the promise of tomorrow. One discovery reshaped the way early humans moved. They learned to follow the rhythm of migrating animals. Herds of antelope and bison swept across grasslands with the turning seasons. And people walked in their shadow. Wandering became strategy. Every trail of hoofprints etched itself into memory, creating the first unwritten maps. Valleys and plains carried stories of safe passage, handed down from elders to children beside firelight. For the first time, families did not drift aimlessly. They traveled with intent, chasing survival and promise. In following the herds, humanity stepped closer to mastering the journey rather than enduring it. The land rose against them with challenges, rivers too deep to cross, forests that swallowed light, and silence that carried hidden predators. Yet hunger and hope forced invention. Logs bound into rafts floated them across rushing waters, while fire carved passages through tangled trees. Every barrier was a gamble, each step forward a test of nerve. Some crossings ended in loss, but many opened doors to new hunting grounds and fresh shelter. Fear slowly hardened into resilience, teaching humanity that progress demanded risk, not retreat. Leaving the cave was not just an escape from hunger, it was a choice that defined humanity. Short hunts grew into longer migrations, each step weaving survival with ambition. These early journeys trained bodies, sharpened minds, and built the courage needed for the greatest departure of all, leaving Africa. In every hesitant stride, our ancestors carried the spark of exploration, proving travel was not chance, but a calling written into their spirit. Africa had been humanity's home for nearly 2 million years. But by 60,000 years ago, the land itself began to betray them. Grasslands shrank into sand, rivers thinned to dust, and the herds they relied on vanished into emptiness. Around fading fires, families faced a choice no generation had dared before. To remain meant hunger and death. To leave meant danger without end. Yet in the silence of those nights, the horizon became a promise. This was not a march of armies, but of barefoot wanderers, guided by hunger, driven by fear, carried by hope. Humanity's greatest gamble had begun. The first great journeys did not cut through forests or mountains, they traced the water's edge. Families moved north along the coast, where the tide offered food and the sea guided their steps. When straits blocked the way, they lashed reeds and logs into fragile rafts, daring to float across waters like the Red Sea. For the first time, humans saw the horizon not as a boundary, but as a bridge. On untouched beaches, they cracked open shellfish, hunted seabirds, and left imprints where no one had stood before. Each crossing was both risk and revelation. The ocean, once feared, became a pathway. With every campfire on new shores, humanity's courage grew, and their world expanded forever. Leaving Africa meant stepping into a world that tested them at every turn. In the Middle East, deserts stretched endless and merciless, their sands burning bare feet, and their winds drying throats to dust. Asia brought the opposite jungles heavy with monsoon rains, where unseen predators prowled and insects swarmed. Then came Europe, where ice bit into flesh and endless winters demanded fire, clothing, and shelter like never before. Each new land forced invention, each obstacle shaping new skills. Many lives were lost, yet those who endured carried hard-won wisdom forward. With every adaptation, stone blades, hide tents, controlled fire wanderers became masters of survival. Humanity's true strength was revealed not in brute force, but in learning to bend, adapt, and endure. The Great Migration revealed a startling truth: our ancestors were not alone. In Europe, they met the Neanderthals, powerful hunters shaped by endless winters. In Asia, they crossed paths with the elusive Denisovans, whose presence survives only in fragments of bone and DNA. Some meetings erupted in violence, tribes clashing over land and prey. Others unfolded in exchange, skills traded, fire refined, and bloodlines joined. These encounters changed humanity forever, proving survival meant more than endurance. It meant absorbing strength, sharing knowledge, and carrying it into the future. By the close of their journey, humans had set foot on nearly every corner of the old world. Across frozen plains and steaming forests, they left fire pits and tools as quiet testaments of their passage. The migration was not simply movement, it was transformation. The wilderness was no longer untouched. Humanity had claimed it as home. 20,000 years ago, at the height of the Ice Age, humans reached the frigid edges of Siberia. Before them stretched a vast, silent, scentless snow, frozen seas, and a land bridge called Beringia that connected worlds. This corridor was both promise and peril. To stay meant hunger, for the herds had vanished. To cross meant gambling lives against the unknown. Families huddled around flickering fires, gripping stone tools, weighing survival against fear. Children looked toward the horizon, where white land dissolved into sky. One step forward would mean abandoning the old world. Yet that step would carve the path that carried humanity into a new continent and a new destiny. The crossing was not a single journey, but a slow tide of generations moving forward. Families marched across the tundra, where winds shrieked like predators, and cold turned every breath to ice. Children rode on weary shoulders, while elders leaned on spears, each step carved from endurance. Fire was guarded as if it were life itself, its glow the fragile border between survival and death. Mammoth herds offered food, hides, and shelter, yet to hunt them meant risking everything. Some groups vanished in storms, their trails erased, while others pressed onward, guided by memory and instinct. Around each fire, stories were etched into bone and stone, knowledge passed down. Step by step, humanity pushed further than ever before. Not every road into the unknown was carved through ice. Along restless coasts, skilled hands stretched animal hides across wooden frames, shaping fragile vessels that floated like bones on water. Families trusted these boats to carry them across rivers, bays, and unseen horizons. The sea was both a barrier and a highway, offering freedom yet threatening ruin with every storm. Some journeys ended in silence beneath the waves. Others reached shores rich with life. These vessels were more than tools of travel, they were symbols of courage and imagination. Proof that humanity could turn peril into possibility. At last, daring bands of wanderers stepped from the frozen bridge into a world untouched by human feet. Before them stretched a continent alive, with giant mammoths rumbling across endless plains, saber-toothed cats slipping through tall grass, and sloths the size of wagons clawing at trees. Nothing was familiar. Every sight demanded new understanding. To live here, they had to craft fresh ways to hunt, to build, to endure. Yet with each step, they carried more than hunger and hope. They carried the story of humanity itself. Their footprints were not only marks in the soil, they were declarations. That the unknown could be claimed, with every crossing, the limits of the world collapsed. Ice fields and oceans, once thought impassable, became doorways to new beginnings. By the waning of the Ice Age, humans had reached every habitable continent, carrying fire, memory, and courage. No longer mere wanderers, they had become explorers of a shared planet, turning the Earth itself into home. For Stone Age travelers, every path was uncertain. Hunger lingered, storms threatened, and predators watched from the dark. Yet survival was more than strength, it was guided by belief. In caves and carvings, symbols spoke to spirits, as if prayers could guard each step. Ancestors lived on in stories, transforming danger into destiny. Fear was not erased, but reshaped into purpose. These myths became armor for the mind, giving courage where reason faltered, and turning each journey into both struggle and sacred passage through the unknown. Fire was never just a flame. It pushed back the night, kept wolves at bay, and gathered people into circles of safety. Stone tools were passports into survival, chiseling wood, carving meat, and shaping the path ahead. Yet their most enduring tool was the story. Around the fire's glow, voices carried warnings, wisdom, and hope. They spoke of rivers that curved like snakes, plants that healed or harmed, and hunts that ended in triumph or loss. These tales became memory maps, guiding footsteps long after the storytellers were gone. Ensuring survival grew from knowledge as much as strength. Necessity lit the path of invention. To wander without knowledge was to invite death, but to taste, test, and remember meant survival. Roots that nourished, berries that poisoned, each discovery reshaped the choices of the next step. Above, stars stitched maps across the sky, their constellations whispering direction through vast deserts and endless plains. Alongside, wolves became allies, their keen senses sharpening human survival until they grew into the first dogs. Every breakthrough was a lesson earned, turning fragile journeys into deliberate quests toward new and unknown worlds. Knowledge turned into culture, shaping more than survival. It created identity. Around flickering fires, myths mingled with lessons, forming a memory greater than any single tribe. Children absorbed this wisdom like breath, carrying the past forward in every step. Journeys ceased to be only movement. They became bonds, threads tying generations together. Even in unknown lands, travelers walked with invisible companions, the voices of ancestors, guiding, warning, and strengthening their path forward. Travel wove people together. What began as survival stitched families into tribes, and tribes into a shared story. Hardship forged bonds, discovery seeded tradition, and myth carried meaning across landscapes. With every step, humanity was not only moving through space, it was shaping culture, memory, and the first threads of civilization. By 10,000 years ago, the age of endless wandering was giving way to something new. Along fertile rivers, seeds pressed into soil became the first promise of permanence. Villages rose, smoke curled from steady hearths, and life shifted to the cycles of planting and harvest. Yet in these still places, the memory of the journey endured. Elders told stories of roads that stretched beyond the horizon, of ancestors who followed game and stars. Settled, but never stilled, humanity carried the spirit of travel within its roots. The same trails once carved by hunters and families on the move, slowly transformed into something greater. Along these paths, obsidian for blades, salt for preservation, shells for ornament, and hides for warmth flowed from camp to camp. But goods were never the only cargo. Words, songs, and symbols traveled too, weaving connections between distant groups. What began as survival journeys turned into lifelines of cooperation, stitching scattered settlements into networks of trust and exchange. These first trade routes were more than roads across land. They were the foundations of civilization, precursors to the great highways and seas of history. By the close of the Stone Age, humanity had become a presence across every horizon. In South America, hunters pursued giant sloths and raised riverside villages. In Australia's deserts, survival was guided by songlines, oral maps etched in memory and story. In the Arctic, small bands built lives against endless ice. Deserts, jungles, mountains, and islands all bore the marks of human footsteps. Each land reshaped culture, yet the instinct to move forward never faded. Humanity had become global, following horizons until none remained untouched. The journey of the Stone Age never truly ended. Farming and villages marked a new chapter, but the blueprint was already written by wanderers who crossed deserts, seas, and frozen plains. Every road, every ship, every flight echoes their first daring steps. What began as survival grew into exploration, and exploration into connection. Their legacy endures, a reminder that movement is life, and the world belongs to those brave enough to walk it.